6th and 7th place for Ferrari in the first qualifying session of the Miami Grand Prix weekend, the 6th round of the 2025 Formula One Championship. Yet another clearly underwhelming result in Formula One. But Ferrari could not do much more on Friday, as the base setup was not optimal and even the adjustments made during the first free practice session did not eliminate the limits of the Italian car. So once again, it was about recovering ground in the 100 kilometers where making up positions on those ahead could be easier due to the rain. The first major news is Charles Leclerc's crash in the laps leading up to the starting grid. The Monegasque driver unfortunately loses the SF25 car under braking and crashes into the barriers. The car is too damaged and, considering the little time available, Charles Leclerc is forced to watch the sprint race from the pit wall. Blue-striped Pirelli tires are fitted to the only Ferrari left in the Miami sprint race. These are the extreme wet tires used due to the heavy downpour that hit the American track. All the necessary instructions are given by his race engineer Riccardo Adami, in order to advise on the behavior to adopt, especially in the first laps. In these conditions, with a slippery surface, you start in second gear to avoid wheel spin as much as possible. However, Race Direction decided to run 2 laps behind the safety car before determining what to do. In the meantime, the British driver complains about poor visibility, a scenario in which his race engineer reminds him to work on the tires. At the end of the 2 laps, the red flag is shown. The stewards have decided to halt the race for the time being, as there is too much water on the track. Everyone returns to the pit lane. About 20 minutes later, the 7-time Formula One world champion gets back into the Ferrari. Apparently, the rain has stopped. Lewis Hamilton and Riccardo Adami talk over the radio to best manage the car. They discuss brake balance and differential mid-corner. It is essential to handle the changing conditions to avoid damaging lockups and keep the car rotating. Again, 2 more laps are completed behind the safety car to assess how the race should resume. Standing start. This is the decision from Race Direction. Lewis Hamilton maintains his starting position and does not attempt any attacks on his rivals. Behind him, it's Alex Albon who becomes quite threatening, forcing the Briton to repeatedly check his mirrors to avoid leaving any space for his Thai British compatriot. Tire activation at that moment is anything but easy, especially for a Ferrari that tends to put less energy into the tires. Lewis Hamilton immediately complains about poor rotation, unable to carry the desired speed through the middle of corners. Traction is also problematic due to a rear axle still outside the target temperature range, too cold. It must be said that on the more technical sections of the track, car number 44 is visibly struggling. Meanwhile, the sky clears and rays of sun begin to warm the track surface. The tires, now overheating, are reported by Lewis Hamilton, who is told to move off the racing line on the straights to help cool them down. The tire crisis becomes clear just past the halfway mark of the race. Overheating is occurring on the rear axle, while the front remains cold. Driving the car in these conditions becomes really difficult. At that point, Ferrari takes a risk by pitting early to fit dry tires. Mediums had been suggested by the pit wall, but Lewis Hamilton opts instead for softs. Once back on track, the British driver finds himself in 15th place with only 5 laps to go. However, the call to the pits turns out to be excellent, allowing for a fantastic pace. The extra grip offered by the softs is fully exploited by Lewis Hamilton, who pushes extremely hard and is rewarded with a strong comeback over just a few laps with his SF25. With 3 laps to go, the Briton is even up to 3rd place. Shortly after, however, a safety car intervention caused by Fernando Alonso's retirement ends the Briton's charge. In practice, the 100-kilometer mini-race ends there. Big applause is due for Ferrari's superb strategy, and it is worth highlighting again how Lewis Hamilton chose the soft tire, rejecting the mediums that would not have given him the same performance advantage. Lewis Hamilton fields the SF25 single-seater with the soft tires and moves up to 3rd place, delivering an unexpected podium for the Maranello team in a weekend that had started off poorly. This result is a morale boost for the British driver, but it does not change the overall picture. In this complicated start to the 2025 Formula One season with Ferrari, Lewis Hamilton has only been shining in the sprint races. The British champion secured a podium in Miami by switching to dry tires after the first part of the race on intermediates. Starting from 6th, and benefiting from Charles Leclerc's error, as the Monegasque was not able to take part in the sprint after damaging his SF25 on the lap to the grid, Lewis Hamilton had to deal with a tough opening phase. After a few laps stuck behind George Russell, the British driver lost ground to the Mercedes and had to defend from Alex Albon's Williams. On the intermediate tires, Lewis Hamilton struggled heavily, complaining about how hard it was to get the car to turn. However, he made the most of the drying track by switching to slicks earlier than his direct rivals. During the race, Lewis Hamilton also praised his mechanics for the excellent pit stop. Finding himself in fourth after the round of stops, Lewis Hamilton overtook Max Verstappen, whose car was damaged after an unsafe release. After the sprint, Lewis Hamilton expressed his happiness, saying it had been a tough year so far, but he was pleased with the result. The British driver mentioned that he never expected it to rain in Miami, noting that it was the first time they had all been on track in wet conditions there, and it provided an exciting race. The 7-time Formula One world champion admitted to struggling on the intermediate tires, adding that everyone had similar difficulties. Lewis Hamilton explained that he made the decision to pit towards the end, as he was not making progress and felt it was time to take a risk, which ultimately paid off. The former Mercedes driver also mentioned that he wished there had been a couple more laps to challenge the leaders, before offering his congratulations to McLaren, who secured a 1-2 finish in the Miami sprint, with Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. For Ferrari and the Briton, it was also a sign that any wild suggestions of a premature end to their relationship are wide of the mark. Lewis Hamilton is not the kind of guy to give up on a challenge. It's not been an easy start to the 2025 Formula One Championship for Lewis Hamilton, and his regular assertion that he is simply taking time to get used to a new car and team has been met with some skepticism. However, others who are going through the same process this year know exactly what he is facing as he moves along the learning curve. You could look at history and point out examples of drivers making a smooth transition and even winning their first races with new teams. The fact is that the current ground effect cars are much trickier to drive at the limit than those of the past, and range of controls available to drivers far more complicated, an aspect that was also confirmed by Carlos Sainz. The former Ferrari driver stated that nowadays, the cars require a very specific driving style to be quick. He compared them to the cars of 2021, noting that back then, it was possible to drive with 2 or 3 different styles and still achieve similar lap times, as the car allowed for different approaches to reach the limit. The Spaniard explained that the more he drives this generation of cars and analyzes the data, the more he realizes that a single driving style is needed to be fast. The Williams driver emphasized that if you don't drive in that way, you will never be quick. According to Carlos Sainz, it's the way the car interacts with the driver that requires a specific approach, which must be fully understood, adding that these cars are particularly difficult to drive.